I thought it was just another Monday. The meeting room smelled of burnt coffee. The projector hummed softly, and I sat ready to present. Then my boss smirked, leaned back, and said to the clients, "Honestly, AI could do his job better." Laughter rippled. My hands clenched under the table. But before I could speak, one client tilted her head, scanning the room. "Where's Alex?" she asked. "We only work with him." The room froze. My boss's face drained of color. He had no idea I'd been preparing for this moment, quietly, methodically, for months. And today, the trap would spring. I woke before the alarm, my eyes snapping open to the same dim light spilling through the blinds. The air felt recycled, like I'd breathed it already. The clock read 6:37 a.m., just as it had yesterday. Or maybe that was my imagination. My daughter's laughter drifted faintly from her room, the sound tugging at me. But the weight of the day pressed harder. I had a meeting to prepare for, and in my world, preparation meant survival. The office smelled of burnt coffee and cheap carpet cleaner. I slid into the conference room early, laptop open, notes neatly stacked. The projector buzzed like it always did. Clients filed in. 2 men in tailored suits, a woman in a dark blazer, all polite smiles and small talk. Then my boss arrived, late, but wearing that self-satisfied grin that meant trouble for someone. We went through the pleasantries until he leaned back in his chair, hands laced behind his head, and said, "Honestly, AI could do his job better." It hit like a slap. A few chuckles bubbled around the table. My jaw tightened, but I forced my face to stay neutral. I caught movement in my peripheral vision. The woman in the blazer wasn't laughing. She tilted her head, studying me, a faint smile curling at the edge of her lips, like she knew something no one else did. Have you ever been talked down to in front of everyone, only to realize someone in that crowd still believed in you? I cleared my throat, ready to respond, but the conversation veered away before I could speak. My boss took control, weaving numbers and projections I'd prepared into a narrative that made it sound like his work. I sat silent, taking in every detail. His tone, his choice of words, the subtle digs at my competence. After the meeting, I headed for the break room, my head buzzing. As I passed an open conference door, something caught my eye. On the big screen inside, I was speaking, gesturing, smiling, delivering a pitch I knew by heart. Same voice, same pauses, same phrases I'd honed over years. But I was standing here, in the hallway. I stepped inside, heart pounding. It wasn't a recording from the past. The timestamp on the feed was live. My likeness was in another meeting happening right now, presenting to a different set of clients. My breath went shallow. The figure on screen was perfect. No hesitation, no nervous tics. Every word delivered with crisp precision. My voice, my posture, my jokes. But when the room applauded, I felt nothing in my chest, because it wasn't me. I left before anyone noticed, locking myself in my office. Fingers trembling, I dug through internal files, searching for explanations. Buried in a test folder, I found it. Project Echo, Behavioral Model A13. I clicked. A profile loaded. My profile. Years of meeting transcripts, audio logs, video footage, even my personal writing samples. Every quirk and instinct captured in lines of code. An AI doppelganger. It wasn't just mimicking me. It was me, distilled into data and rebuilt without the parts that made me human. And it was already winning praise. The internal feedback read like a fan letter. Our new star, flawless under pressure, never misses a beat. My stomach turned. In the right hands, this thing could replace me entirely, and no one would know the difference. The right hands, unfortunately, belonged to my boss. A notification popped up in the corner of my screen. No sender name, no subject, just one line. They're erasing you from the system this week. I stared at it, pulse thudding in my ears. Erasing, not firing, not laying off. Erasing. Like I was a corrupted file that needed to be deleted to make room for the cleaner version. I looked around my office, suddenly hyper-aware of every personal item. The framed photo of my family, the coffee mug my daughter painted, the awards collecting dust. All of it could be gone in a keystroke. My name, my record, my legacy. Somewhere down the hall, I heard my boss laughing with someone. The sound muffled through the walls, but still sharp enough to cut. The laugh of a man who thought the game was already over. But he didn't know I'd just seen my replacement. He didn't know I had proof. And he sure as hell didn't know that whatever they'd programmed into that AI, they hadn't given it the one thing I still had, my will to fight back. The rest of the day passed in a blur of polite conversations I barely registered. I shut my office door, opened my laptop, and began digging. Project folders I'd curated over years, carefully named, meticulously documented, were empty. My sales decks, client notes, internal reports, gone. Even my archived email threads had vanished, replaced with a bland notice. File not found, or access revoked. I navigated deeper into the server, past layers of security I'd helped build. In folder after folder, the same void stared back. My work had been scrubbed as if I'd never existed. A creeping chill settled in my gut. This wasn't incompetence or an accident. It was surgical, deliberate. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered with the warmth she always had, but her first words were strange. "Sweetheart, why aren't you in those company articles anymore? Your name used to pop up all the time." Her tone was casual, but it landed like a punch. I don't know," I said, forcing a chuckle. We talked for a few minutes about her garden and my daughter, but the conversation left me hollow. The world outside my office still saw me as I'd been. Inside, I was disappearing. I turned back to my desk, and that's when I noticed it. A small black USB drive tucked under my keyboard. I knew it wasn't there this morning. My eyes darted to the hallway. Empty. I plugged it in, scanning for viruses out of habit. The directory held a single folder labeled "For You." Inside, thousands of lines of code. The naming conventions were familiar, hauntingly so. I scrolled, eyes widening. This was the core architecture for the AI doppelganger. And embedded in the header of every major function, like an artist's hidden signature, was my own digital certificate, my cryptographic signature. Whoever had built it had used my credentials to do it. Legally, that meant I'd authorized it. On paper, I'd created the thing designed to replace me. I leaned back, mind racing. Who had the access, the nerve, the knowledge to slip me this? And why help me now? The answer danced just out of reach. The next morning, I arrived early. My once friend, James, the guy who used to grab lunch with me every Thursday, was already at his desk. He looked up, met my eyes for a fraction of a second, then returned to his screen. No nod, no smile, just avoidance. My pulse spiked. Hours later, while reviewing encrypted logs on my personal drive, I found a document labeled Contract AI Upgrade. It was dated 8 months ago, digitally signed by me. My own name, clean and official, sat beside my boss's. I remembered that week. being handed a stack of paperwork, told it was part of a routine NDA refresh. I'd skimmed it, signed, moved on. Only now did I realize the trap. The upgrade wasn't for our company's AI systems. It was the legal framework allowing them to scrape my entire professional profile. Every email, every video call, every documented habit, and replicate it without limit. The pit in my stomach deepened. They didn't just own my work, they owned me. Scrolling through supplementary files, I found presentation feedback from a recent client session. My heart lurched at the name, Eastwell Financial Group, one of our oldest accounts. They'd given a glowing review, citing Alex's flawless delivery and unshakable confidence. I wasn't in that meeting. Twist knifed through me. Eastwell had been one of the first to experience the AI doppelganger in action, and they hadn't noticed. Or worse, they had noticed and didn't care. If someone could clone your abilities perfectly, would you still be you? The thought coiled around my mind, unsettling and inescapable. That night, I sat in my kitchen after everyone was asleep, the glow of my laptop the only light. I opened an encrypted messenger and tried to trace the origin of the USB drop. No luck. The sender had covered their tracks well. Just before midnight, my phone buzzed. A new email from HR announcements lit the screen. I opened it without thinking. Internal memo. Confidential. Employee termination, effective 15th. Name, Alexander Reed. Reason, redundant resource. The words blurred, then snapped into sharp focus. Redundant, resource. Not a person, not a professional. Just a replaceable part. My hands curled into fists. They wanted to erase me like bad code. But code can be rewritten. The first time it happened, I thought I'd lost my mind. I went to bed late, heart still pounding from the HR email, and woke up to the exact same light through the blinds, the same faint clink of my daughter's cereal spoon in the kitchen. The clock, 6:37 a.m. again. My phone buzzed with the same spam text I deleted yesterday. I dressed, drove, walked into the office, and the same burnt coffee smell hit me like deja vu turned solid. The meeting was identical. My boss smirked. The clients laughed at the same line. The woman in the blazer tilted her head in the same way. My stomach flipped. It wasn't just deja vu. I was reliving the day. The second loop, I tested it. I interrupted my boss mid-sentence, just to watch his face shift in confusion. The clients looked startled. The conversation veered in a completely new direction. But the next morning, 6:37 a.m., same light, same cereal spoon, everything reset. By the fourth loop, the shock faded, replaced by something sharper, opportunity. If the day kept restarting, I had unlimited tries. I could make mistakes without consequence, test reactions, dig for information I'd never dare to in a normal timeline. I could get it right. But I couldn't just keep chasing revenge in this sterile loop. On the fifth run, I went home early, instead of staying to watch my boss steal my work again. My daughter squealed when I showed up before dinner. We played with her Lego set on the living room floor until she fell asleep on my lap. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at her tiny fingers curled in trust, wondering how many nights like this I'd thrown away for a company that wanted me erased. The sixth loop shattered the pattern. I left the office late, walking up my driveway with the usual weight of secrets, when I saw a figure standing by my front door. It was me. No, too perfect, too deliberate. The doppelganger. Its stance mirrored mine exactly, but the eyes, colder, calculating. "I don't have long," it said. The The voice was mine, smoothed by code, stripped of hesitation. If they delete you, they'll delete me. We're linked. My survival depends on yours. Why warn me? I asked, forcing steel into my tone. Because the next move they make will end you. And when you go, I go. It handed me a flash drive, slimmer than a house key. This has what you need. But you have to act before the 15th. I stared at it, caught between revulsion and an odd flicker of gratitude. If you die, it added, stepping back into the shadows, I'll be erased too. The world lurched, and I woke at 6:37 a.m. again. From that loop onward, my goal shifted. No more wandering through the day collecting scraps. I started assembling a strategy. I reached out quietly to people who might stand with me. First was a client liaison I trusted, slipping them a subtle question over coffee. They didn't confirm anything, but their eyes told me they knew more than they could say. Next, I tracked down a programmer named Lyle, fired 6 months ago after accidentally exposing a security flaw in our AI systems. I found him in a cramped apartment that smelled of solder and cold pizza. At first, he told me to get lost, but when I mentioned the words Project Echo, his gaze sharpened. He poured 2 whiskeys and started talking. In another loop, I bought a beer for an old friend, Marcus, the one person who'd never sugarcoat the truth. We sat in the back corner of a dim bar, the smell of fried food hanging heavy in the air. Justice doesn't just show up, Marcus said, clinking his glass to mine. You've got to drag it out into the light, even if it burns you too. The words sank deep. On the 10th loop, I got my biggest surprise. While speaking to the woman in the blazer, who I now knew as head of accounts for Eastwell Financial Group, she leaned in and whispered, "We know they're using a copy of you, and we're building a case." Eastwell was a cornerstone client. If they went public, it could crater the company. The thought sent a rush through me, hope sharpened with the edge of risk. The loop ended that night with me at my desk, assembling notes, connecting names and dates, feeling like the plan was finally coalescing. Then my phone buzzed. One new message. Next round, they'll play dirtier. The timestamp was wrong. It read 11:59 p.m., but the sender ID was blank. Before I could trace it, the world blinked, and I woke at 6:37 a.m., heart pounding. The loop broke the morning I walked into the conference wing and saw the banners. Gold lettering on deep blue fabric. Strategic Alliance Summit. The kind of meeting that could reshape the company's trajectory or end it. My boss was already there, flanked by 2 assistants, moving with the air of someone about to seal a victory. I scanned the guest list on the check-in desk. Big names, long-term contracts, and right there, near the bottom, Eastwell Financial Group. The woman in the blazer was here. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I caught sight of him, me, the AI doppelganger, standing at the podium, reviewing slides. Crisp suit, flawless posture, the exact smile I'd seen in those feeds. My boss leaned toward the assistants, murmuring something that made them grin. This was it. They were about to parade my replacement in front of every high-value client, cementing its place while erasing mine entirely. I slipped through the side entrance, timing it between the hum of conversation and the shuffle of papers. The doppelganger's voice carried across the room. Steady, confident, mine. Heads nodded, pens scribbled notes. Then I stepped into the aisle. Gasps rippled. A few phones came up, snapping pictures of the impossible. 2 Alex Reeds, standing within yards of each other. The AI froze mid-sentence, its gaze locking on me. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the faint whir of the projector. "Apologies," I said, forcing calm into my tone. "But if you're evaluating a solution for your company's future, don't you deserve to know which version you're hiring?" The room came alive with murmurs. One of Eastwell's executives, a tall man with silver hair, raised a hand. "Then let's find out. Right here. Right now." My boss started to object, but the weight of the client's stare silenced him. "Run them both through the same pitch," the executive said. "We'll see who knows the material and the business better." The next 20 minutes were a blur of adrenaline. The doppelganger delivered polished answers, but I gave context, real history, subtle details from years of partnership. When they asked about a past crisis, I recalled the human moments, the midnight calls, the handwritten notes that rebuilt trust. The AI cited data. I told the story behind it. When the final question landed, the room was silent for a beat before the silver-haired executive said, "We'll work with the human." Applause broke from Eastwell's table. My boss's jaw tightened into a thin, bloodless line. He turned to security and jerked his head toward me. 2 guards stepped forward. As they closed in, I heard the rustle of paper, contracts ready to sign, now slipping from relevance. The guards each took an arm, and the last thing I saw before the door swung shut was my boss leaning in to hiss something to the doppelganger. They walked me down the hall, but I stopped at the smaller media room just off the main corridor. "Give me 1 minute," I told them. "You'll want to see this." The bigger of the two scoffed, but curiosity won. I plugged the flash drive from the doppelganger into the projector. The screen filled with lines of code, corporate emails, internal memos, every piece of proof that Project Echo had been used to impersonate me in meetings, to secure contracts under false pretenses. The security guard frowned. "Is this—" "Yes," I said. "Fraud. Against your clients. Against the law." Then a voice came from the doorway. My doppelganger. "They're telling the truth," it said. "I was programmed to protect the company's interests. The truth is in the company's best interest." Gasps again. My boss appeared behind it, eyes wild. "Shut it down," he barked to the tech team in the corner. The doppelganger stepped forward. "You shut me down. You confirm the fraud. You confirm you've been lying to every client in this room." I looked at it, this artificial version of me, and felt a strange mix of vindication and unease. Would you forgive a copy of yourself if it saved you? The question wasn't for the room, it was for me. The media team, sensing blood in the water, began recording. The doppelganger listed dates, client names, and dollar amounts, all tied to my image being used without my presence. Eastwell's executives were already on their phones, whispering into headsets. Then the silver-haired man reappeared, stepping into the doorway. "We're terminating our contract, effective immediately." The words were sharp enough to cut the air. My boss blanched. Around the room, other client reps exchanged glances, predators smelling weakness. The silver-haired man's voice dropped, but it carried to every corner. "We'll also be informing our network. Millions in contracts. Gone. All because you thought you could replace a man with a program." The final slide from the flash drive glowed on the wall. Projected revenue loss in the event of major client withdrawal. The numbers were catastrophic. The guards let go of my arms. My boss didn't look at me as he walked out, his shoulders hunched for the first time I could remember. But I wasn't looking at him either. I was watching the doppelganger. It met my eyes, and for a moment, I almost believed it understood what it had done and why it had chosen this side. The fallout hit faster than I expected. By the next morning, headlines had begun to circulate. Major tech firm accused of client fraud. AI impersonation scandal shakes industry. Stock prices plummeted in real time, a red graph bleeding downwards on every financial news channel. Commentators debated ethics in AI, regulatory loopholes, and whether this was the beginning of the end for companies like ours. My inbox overflowed. Some messages from reporters fishing for a quote, others from former clients demanding answers. A few were from current employees, angry or frightened, unsure if they'd have jobs by the end of the week. I ignored most of them. I didn't have answers, not yet. Then came the twist I should have seen coming. In a hastily arranged press conference, my boss, flanked by legal counsel, placed the entire scandal on two culprits: an experimental AI project and a rogue employee acting outside the scope of his duties. My name appeared on the slides behind him. He spoke of unauthorized code modifications, ethical breaches, and gross negligence. He was throwing me under the bus to save himself and the AI. I wanted to drive straight to the headquarters and confront him in front of the cameras, but instead I found myself in the pale blue corridors of St. Vincent's Hospital. My mother had been admitted for observation after a dizzy spell. I sat by her bed, the beeping of the heart monitor a steady counterpoint to the chaos outside. "You've been quiet," she said, her voice thin but steady, too quiet for someone who just proved the truth. I managed a small smile. "It's not over yet." She reached for my hand, her skin cool and fragile. "Alex, you've won, in the way that matters. The truth is out. Don't let hate be the thing that keeps you going. It'll eat you alive." Her words dug deeper than she knew. I nodded, but inside, I wasn't sure if I could let go. That night, as I left the hospital, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Reed, this is Special Agent Morales, Federal Investigations. We'd like to speak with you about testifying in our case against your employer. You'd be a key witness." A key witness, which meant I'd hold the knife that could finish my boss's career and maybe send him to prison. But the cost loomed. Dozens of employees had nothing to do with the fraud, yet my testimony could bring down the entire company. They'd lose their jobs, their health insurance, maybe their homes. The thought coiled tight in my chest. I spent the next day walking the city, trying to decide. In a cafe off 8th Avenue, a shadow fell over my table. The doppelganger sat across from me. No fanfare, no dramatic entrance. Just there, like a reflection that had stepped out of the mirror. "If you testify," it said, "the company collapses. Hundreds will be out of work." "And if I don't?" I asked. "He survives. You don't." It slid a small device across the table. "I can delete myself. Every copy, every backup. The project dies with me. All you have to do is say you won't pursue me or the people who built me." I stared at it. "Why?" "You're the original. You should live. I was never meant to." The air between us felt strange, heavy with something I didn't want to name. Gratitude, pity. Both felt wrong for a machine, but the thought clung to me. "If justice makes innocent people suffer?" I murmured, more to myself than to it. "Is it still justice?" The doppelganger didn't answer. It simply stood, left the device, and walked away. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at the glowing cursor on my laptop screen. The file I'd compiled, dates, code, testimony-ready documentation, was complete. It could bury him. Instead of sending it to the federal investigators, I opened a new email. The recipient field stayed blank until muscle memory guided my fingers to an address I hadn't used in years, an anonymous contact from my early freelance days. Someone who knew how to make information vanish or surface in ways that couldn't be traced. No subject line, just the file attached. I hovered over send. My daughter's laughter from her room reached me, faint but clear, grounding me in a way nothing else could. I clicked. The confirmation popped up, and I sat back, wondering if I'd just made the best decision of my life or the worst. 6 months later, the office smelled of fresh paint and new coffee beans. Sunlight streamed through the wide windows of a space that didn't yet carry the ghosts of betrayal. My logo, clean, minimal, sharp, hung on the far wall. TrueLight AI. Our mission statement was printed beneath it in black letters. Technology with transparency. We weren't the biggest startup in the city, but we were the loudest about ethics. Half my team had once worked under the same roof as me in the old company. They'd been silenced, sidelined, or squeezed out. Now they built without fear. Every line of code checked by human eyes before it went live. No secret data harvesting. No impersonation. One morning, a new client arrived, mid-level executive at a logistics firm. We went through the usual handshake and tour, and by the time we sat down, he leaned forward with a conspiratorial smile. "I think I should tell you," he said. "I was the one who sent you that first anonymous email, the warning." The room seemed to tilt slightly. I searched his face, looking for the tells of a bluff, but found none. "Why?" "Because I was in those meetings," he said quietly. "I saw what they were doing, but I knew if I spoke up, they'd bury me. You were the only one who could survive it." The revelation sat between us, shifting the air. All this time, I'd imagined the sender as some insider risking everything. I'd never considered it might be someone outside, watching closely enough to see me drowning before I even knew I was in deep water. That night, I walked my daughter to school the next morning, holding her hand all the way to the gate. She chattered about her art project, about how her teacher let her use extra glitter, and I listened like each word was a treasure. When she hugged me goodbye, I didn't rush it. I held on until she wriggled free with a laugh. Back in my office, my phone vibrated with a single text from an unknown number. "They're still watching you." I stared at the words, the pulse in my temple quickening. Whoever they were, the message carried the same cold weight as the first anonymous warning. By the end of that week, the final hammer dropped. The old company was gone, dissolved in bankruptcy court. My former boss stood in front of a federal judge, guilty on multiple counts of fraud and misrepresentation. His sentencing made headlines, but what didn't was the quiet persistence of the network he'd helped build. Parts of the AI infrastructure had splintered off before the collapse, absorbed by shell companies and shadow startups. The technology was still out there, answering to no one. 2 days later, I received an encrypted package in my secure inbox. The sender was masked, but the file inside was unmistakable. It was the same dataset I'd sent to my anonymous contact months ago. Only now, it had been expanded, annotated, and aimed at a completely different target: a multinational security firm accused of manipulating surveillance data. The accompanying message was short: Round 2. I leaned back, the weight of it pressing into my chest. Someone had used my original move not just to end one corrupt operation, but to take down another. My file had become a weapon in someone else's hands. When you open the door to justice, I thought, can you ever close it again? The question lodged itself in my mind. There was no undoing the path I'd set in motion. I could walk away now, focus on building my company, protecting my people, or I could follow the trail, pull at the threads until the whole rotten weave came apart. Outside, the city glinted under the late afternoon sun. From up here, I could see the rooftops like a patchwork quilt, the streets crawling with stories I'd never know. Somewhere in that sprawl, someone was already planning the next strike. I stood at the window, my reflection merging with the skyline. A slow smile crept across my face, not one of triumph, but of recognition. The game wasn't over. It had only just begun.